I'd like to welcome everybody to the Partnerships Learning Lab. I'm Russ Rogerson, President and CEO of the Morgantown Area Partnership. And today we have, I think, a very timely topic called Managing Stress in Uncertain Times. And we're very pleased to have Dr. Roy Tunick here with us today to present. We hope that you will gain some good out of this presentation as it's part of our series. And Dr. Tunick is going to help us understand how to manage stress in uncertain times, and I'm sure other times as well. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Tunick and let him begin with his presentation. Dr. Tunick?
Thank you. We're going to talk about what stress is, how it impacts health. We're going to be looking at a model of what stress involves, and then we're going to talk about various strategies to deal with stress. And finally, we're going to deal with developing your own first aid kit for stress. What is stress? Well, as you can tell, stress is called life at many times. Stress is the body's reaction to any change that requires a response. So what do we mean by that? Well, in any given situation, your body is going to respond both physically, mentally, and emotionally, not necessarily in equal portions, depending on the situation. So stress does impact one's physical, one's mental, and one's emotional status. But stress is also normal. It's a part of life. You can experience stress through many different ways. Stress from your environment, stress from your body, as well as stress from your thoughts. Currently, we're experiencing a lot of environmental stress because of the pandemic. But there's also other types of stress from the environment. Being in a hurricane or a tornado or a flood could cause stress. Your body responds also to stress in many different ways. You can feel a tightening in your body and in certain parts of your body, maybe more so than other parts of your body. You know, is it your head that's bothering you, your stomach, your back, your legs? It can almost be any part, as well as your thoughts. Stress influences the way we think and we process things. So it's not necessarily that you're wrong in the way you're processing, because at the moment of action, we often don't question how we're thinking or why we're even behaving the way we do. Does stress impact health? Well, we've known that for a fact. We know that stress does have both a positive and negative aspect of health. Stress can also be positive in that it keeps us alert. It keeps us motivated. It gets us ready to respond in dangerous situations or in challenging situations. How can it be positive? Well, stress can be positive in many ways. It can be positive to make us want to eliminate the stress or make a certain goal. If you recently watched the series with Michael Jordan put a lot of stress on himself as well as his teammates, but it was positive stress in that they were working towards a goal. Now, some of his teammates liked the way he dealt with things, and some didn't. But stress can be positive in that it's a motivating factor. On the other hand, stress can be negative. When a person faces continuous challenges without relief or relaxation between the stressors, it can have extremely negative effects on the person's physical as well as psychological and emotional functioning. And currently, we're all hunkering down in this pandemic. Now, that affects people in many different ways. Some people maintain to be very, very productive, and other people are stressed out beyond belief. The little cartoon here showing two lawyers talking with each other. One lawyer says, younger lawyers are always whining about the workload. But I've always worked 80 hours a week and never did any harm to me. The second lawyer says, looking at a person that looks like he's in his 80s, but you're only 25. Yes, stress can have that type of impact on a person's functioning as well as physical health. There was a number of years ago, a Hungarian endocrinologist did some studies on stress at McGill University in Canada. And he came up with what we currently know as Cilia's general adaptation syndrome, or general adaptation stress syndrome. It has 3 stages. But before I go over the 3 stages, I want to tell you a little story that will help exemplify what Cilia's general adaptation syndrome was talking about. Many years ago, my son was a teenager and was a competitive mountain biker. And we traveled all over the United States, and him competing with many, many people his age and older. One of the areas where we went was down in the southern part of West Virginia, where there's a ski resort called Snowshoe. Well, in that ski resort, they also have biking trails, obviously only in the summer months of the year. And the challenge facing my son during this race was a 40K one lap race, which is about 25 miles. And I was asked by some of the organizers if I would volunteer to help them with making sure at different parts of the race, people wouldn't cut the course. So I volunteered to do that. They put me in a pickup truck and drove me out into the middle of nowhere. And they left me off, telling me that this is where they could possibly cut the course. So be alert. And I parked myself on a big old rock and I sat there. After about a half an hour, I realized, I said to myself, my goodness, I'm in the middle of nowhere. I bet there are wild animals here, like bears, mountain lions. And I suddenly started getting anxious and realized the only thing I had in my possession was my water bottle, a rusty little knife that had a toothpick in it, and my wallet with credit cards in it. That was it. And here I was sitting on this rock thinking, how am I going to protect myself? Can I threaten the thing that was ready to pounce on me with tetanus? Can I throw my credit cards at him and say, use it as you wish? All those thoughts started going through my mind. And so I started becoming aware of my surroundings, very much aware. And I heard some noise and I got up and I went over to the single track. The single track is where the mountain bikers would travel. And it's the old deer trails. And as I got to the top of the single track, I saw something coming out of the woods. It was a bear. It was a black bear. Fortunately, I was downwind from the black bear. So when he went onto the single track and stood up on his hind legs, pirouetted around, and there I was looking straight at him about 8 feet away. I froze. I didn't know what to do. But fortunately, I was on the high end of the single track. So I looked about 2 or 3 feet taller. Before I knew it, the bear ran away. For the rest of the time I was there, for about 2.5 hours, my heart rate, my blood pressure, I'm sure, were out of control. I tried to do all sorts of things to relax myself, but yet I still maintained a very heightened state of awareness and stress until I was picked up about 2.5 hours later, getting into the truck, told about my experience. When I reached home base, I went to my car and I fell asleep. So Cilia's general adaptation syndrome has 3 stages. The first stage is alarm, prepares a person to respond to the stressor they're experiencing. This is also known as the fight or flight stage. However, subsequent research added the freeze stage or the frozen stage. And therefore, looking back on my my experience, you can see I had a frozen stage, obviously. After sitting around and wondering if the bear was going to come back, my body was still very much highly anxious. My heart rate was still about 120. And I still had a very heightened alert state, and I was very, very concerned that the bear was going to be coming back. So what I did is I marked my territory purposely, not by accident. And eventually, once I returned home to the base of the race, I experienced exhaustion and basically went to sleep. And for about an hour before the race had, after the race had ended. So when does GAS occur? Life events may cause psychological distress. Losing a job, having money problems, having health problems, the pandemic, significant relationship issues, all can impact and cause psychological distress. Think about it. Think about your life as a pyramid. And the base of that pyramid is your foundation. Maybe it involves relationships, job, health, family, okay? All of a sudden, your foundation is affected. You're left without any anywhere to turn. At least that's how you're perceiving the situation. Long-term stress can have an impact on one's physical as well as one's immune system. What we have seen in disaster mental health is that people who are at disaster sites are relieved frequently from their duties to be deprogrammed, so to speak, and process some of the horrors that they have seen. But long-term stress can also have an impact on one's physical and immune system. Soldiers at war in a combat zone are undergoing long-term stress that can have an impact on their physical as well as psychological functioning. Many people have a greater increase for disease, whether it be heart disease, ulcer, depression, PTSD, as well as an increased risk for viral infections. Next, we're going to be looking at managing your stress and worry. One of the first things one needs to realize is that stress, worry, fear, anxiety are all normal reactions. They serve a purpose to get your body prepared to react to the stressful stimuli. Well, is there a right way to do all of this, to prepare your body to deal with all the stress and anxiety and fears that people have? Well, the answer is there is no right way. Everything works with somebody. Nothing works with everybody. So what may work for you may not work for somebody else. So there's no magic cure. There's no magic bullet to deal with eliminating worry, stress, and anxiety. But what you can do is focus on the here and now and what you can do. What do I mean by that? Well, acknowledge your thoughts and your feelings. You may have thoughts of anxiety. You may have thoughts of feeling alone or feeling helpless or even feeling hopeless. Acknowledging those feelings are a good first step. Also acknowledging how your body is functioning. Am I feeling tense? Is my stress being felt in my stomach, in my head, in my back? Being aware of where your body is experiencing the stress is very important, because we'll all be able to use that information to deal with the stress in a more appropriate manner. The first thing you should ask yourself, what can I do right now? What's available to me right now? What can I control? You know what we found out doing some research with returning veterans? Veterans were more likely to be more resilient the older they were and the more education they had. Those almost served as buffers for developing PTSD. unless, of course, they have multiple deployments. And after about 3 or 4 deployments, those factors really didn't serve much good. But it's important, what that information tells us is that one's life experiences and one's way of thinking can help us overcome many situations. The more life experience you have, the more you develop your way of thinking, the better you're going to learn how to cope. One of the pitfalls of one's thinking is one thinks about what if. If this happens, what if this happens? What am I going to do? That's actually leading to a very, very dead-end street. One needs to think about, what can I do? What's available for me? How have I coped with similar situations in the past? Those type of thinkings are much more appropriate and much more growth producing than thinking that you're feeling helpless or hopeless. Hopeless feelings are not good feelings, and ones that should be addressed more professionally. Hopelessness is often related to very serious states of depression. So how does one deal also, besides changing the way we think, how can we learn how to relax and breathe? There's a number of different things out there to learn how to relax, to learn how to breathe. There's systematic relaxation. There's all sorts of different breathing techniques that have been developed. One breathing technique that's very popular is the 4-7-8 breathing technique. What is 4-7-8? 4-7-8 was developed by Dr. Andrew Weil, and his research found out that if one inhales to the count of 4, inhale 1, 2, 3, 4, hold it 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, exhale 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Oops. Inhale, exhale is only 7. My mistake. Another way of breathing is when you inhale, make believe you're bringing up the breath from your toes, bringing it all the way up, holding it for a count of 4, and releasing it out of a count of 8. Still another way of breathing to facilitate relaxation comes more from the field of yoga, where you inhale through one nostril and close that nostril and exhale through the open nostril, and keep on doing that. And that will also result in a great deal of relaxation. Also, managing your stress and worry. Some of that's very, very simple. We were told it's important to wear masks. It's important to wash your hands. It's important to keep social distance. So those are things that we could do without any real effort and feel much more in control of ourselves and temporarily of our environment. What's another important thing that we can do? we can establish, maintain, or enhance our social support. So don't wait for others to contact you. You contact them, whether it be a periodic meeting on FaceTime or Zoom, or a family gathering via a FaceTime or Zoom. All of these things are very, very important to maintain social contact and social support. And knowingly who you can count on, who you can call when things get challenging for you. Another way of managing your anxiety, stress, and worry is to maintain your self-care. Very important. Maintaining self-care is extremely important. Let me give you an example. Before the pandemic, I was working with a client for a few weeks, and each week he came in and he just looked beat up and disheveled. He was worrying about losing his job, and it was horrible. He looked horrible. And I said to him, I said, let's do an experiment. This following week, so next time you come and see me, I would like you for 1 week to take care of yourself. Shower and bathe on a regular basis. Get your hair cut. Shave. Look in the mirror and say, yeah, I like what I see. After a week, client came back. He looked like a different person. He looked about 10 years younger. And I said to him, I said, my goodness, you look great. He says, thank you. It really worked. I feel great. I feel so much better. And he says, and my wife thanks you too. Unexpected benefit. There you go. It's also important to establish a routine or reschedule, and don't overextend yourself. Sometimes, as a way of keeping yourself busy, people will overextend themselves. That's just going to add additional stress. So establish a routine. Be sure to have some flexibility with the routine, and don't overextend yourself. Get appropriate sleep. Boy, this is a big one. If you're not going to work on a regular basis, if you're not sleeping appropriately, getting 6 to 8 hours of sleep, that can affect a lot of aspects of your functioning. So getting on a regular schedule and allowing yourself to go to sleep. You don't need to watch the late night news. And you may not need to watch the news at all. Give yourself a vacation from that as well. It's very important also to exercise. Now with the weather becoming nice again, it's going to be easier to get out and exercise and watch your nutrition. Because I don't know about you, but since the pandemic, every time I go to the grocery store, ice cream is always on sale. How did that happen? I thought ice cream goes on sale in the summertime, but it's on sale now. Make good choices and make a decision. If presented with a situation, think about what options you have, and then make a list of pros and cons. At least 5 pros and 5 cons for each option. And after you do that, it's also very important that you put a value next to each of the pros and cons from 1 to 10. Don't duplicate any of the numbers. Add it up and find out, divide by 5 and find out which of your choices seems to be most logical and appropriate. As you can see, when we're stressed, we eat a lot of ice cream. We eat a lot of cake, a lot of chocolate, a lot of sweets. Why, one might ask? Well, if you spell stress backwards, it spells desserts. Managing, again, your stress and worry. I want you to think about promoting hopeful thinking. What do I mean by that? One way to avoid thinking that's destructive is what we call dichotomous reasoning or dichotomous thinking. When you're involved with dichotomous reasoning or thinking, you're only seeing things as good or bad. Very few things are all good or all bad. Life and death issues are obviously have a higher volume of 9 or 10. But most things are not as important. But we make small things in our own minds as important as life and death things. So scaling involves looking at the situation objectively and asking yourself, I'm acting as if this situation is a 10, but in reality, objectively, it's only a 3. So you can adjust your reactions by adjusting your thinking by using scaling. Another way to promote helpful thinking is to replace an unhelpful thought with a helpful thought. What do I mean by that? Oftentimes people get involved with a lot of disparaging self-beliefs. I'm no good. I'm a failure. I can't accomplish anything. Well, these are very upsetting thoughts, and they're also very nonspecific. If you're saying you're a failure, what do you mean by that? Let's identify and clarify what we mean by that. Well, I can't do anything right. Well, that's still not telling me. Give me an example where you thought you didn't do something right. What it turns out is that the person says to me, for example, I really didn't express myself when I should have. Well, that's not that you're inferior. That's not you're a loser. But so the hopeful thought was, next time that happens, I'm going to express myself or assert my thoughts more clearly. Now, here's some assorted things and fun things to do dealing with and managing your stress and worry. Humor is always good. Hearing a joke, telling a joke is very, very important. Learning how to laugh at life in general is very, very good. Another thing that I've used with young kids is to have them hold up their finger, make a small space between their thumb and forefinger. And what they're supposed to do, especially if there's someone in school that's giving them a lot of grief or bullying, they could hold up their fingers, make sure the person is within that space between their thumb and forefinger, and then crush them. You'll be surprised how effective that can be in getting out some of your thoughts and feelings and anger and frustration and stress. That little technique, using your thumb and forefinger, works a great deal. Another thing that I have used with children as well as adults, is that sometimes you're when you're in a situation where you really cannot express yourself fully. So a good thing to do is take a piece of toilet paper, use a magic marker, write the person's name on it, place it into the toilet, and do whatever you needed to do on top of that. You'll be surprised how that relieves a great deal of stress and tension. Another thing you could do is write that person's name or initials on the bottom of your shoe. And as you walk on it throughout the day, you start wearing off their initials and reducing your stress. These are little techniques and games that seem to work effectively with a lot of people. Another thing you need to be aware of is that you are likely to regress, to backslide. That means we're not going to get better all at once. There's going to be some ups and downs. But when we backslide, that's usually good information to us. What are we doing that caused us to backslide? Did we try to change too many things too quickly? Did we take too many big steps? Oftentimes, those two things are the basis for our backsliding or regression. And it's always important, and when things get totally out of hand, to seek professional help. And yes, the stress ball isn't for throwing at people to get your stress out. Psychological first aid. Well, what is it? Well, actually, it was a technique developed by the Red Cross in dealing with people that have been experiencing distress. Oftentimes, hurricanes, tornadoes, floods, fires. It's a strategy for reducing the stress and promoting resistance and resilience. And in doing that, we need to develop some skill sets. And we're going to call the skill set your first aid kit. And I think it's important to realize that your skill set is like a first aid kit. If you had all of these things in one place, you wouldn't have to search the house for a Band-Aid. You would know where it was. You wouldn't have to search the house for Neosporin, because you know where it is. It's in your first aid kit. So what I want you to do, of the strategies that we used, that were presented to you today, I want you to think about using some of those strategies to include in your first aid kit. Remember, you want to gather data. You want to build on your problem-solving skills. You want to promote positive activities. Make sure you're taking care of yourself. Sleeping, personal care, etc. You want to manage your reactions. Don't catastrophize. Don't look at things economist manner. Have helpful thinking and build healthy connections. And for many of us, when the stresses seem to leave us, some people still will have a difficult time changing.